Before Christmas, the rancher fell sick. She fed his horses, and he never forgot her kindness. Jake Collins clutched the fence post as another wave of fever swept through his body. The December wind bit at his face, but he barely felt it through the burning heat radiating from his skin. His horses whinnied from the stable, hungry and anxious. He had been trying to reach the feed barn for the past 20 minutes, but his legs kept giving out. The ranch stretched empty around him, miles from the nearest neighbor. This phone sat useless on the kitchen counter inside the house, and he had already spent the last of his strength getting this far. The illness had hit him fast. Yesterday morning he had been fine, working the fence line on the north pasture. By noon, his head was pounding. By evening, he could barely stand. Now, as the sun climbed over the Montana hills, he knew he was in serious trouble. The horses needed feeding, the water troughs needed checking. The heater in the foaling barn had been acting up, and with temperatures dropping below freezing, the pregnant mare could be at risk. He tried to take another step and collapsed onto the frozen ground. His vision blurred. Through the haze, he heard an engine approaching on the gravel road. He wanted to call out, but his throat was too dry. The truck slowed, then stopped. A door slammed. Katie Morrison had been driving past the Collins ranch on her way to town when she noticed something wrong. The horses were pressed against the stable fence, restless and loud. The gate to the front yard hung open, swinging in the wind. Jake Collins ran a tight operation. Nothing was ever out of place. She pulled her truck onto the shoulder and killed the engine. She found him lying near the fence, his face pale except for 2 bright spots of fever on his cheeks. His eyes were half closed, but they focused on her when she knelt beside him. "Jake, can you hear me?" He managed to nod. "I'm calling an ambulance." He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Horses," he whispered. "Please." Katie looked toward the stable. She had known Jake for 3 years, ever since she had moved to the valley to work at the veterinary clinic in town. He had always been kind to her, always paid his bills on time, always had a respectful word. He lived alone on this ranch, devoted to his animals and his land. She made the decision quickly. "I'll take care of them." "But you're going to the hospital." She called for help, then half carried, half dragged him to her truck. The ambulance met them at the highway turnoff. As the paramedics loaded him onto the stretcher, he kept trying to talk about the horses, about the mare, about the feed schedule. Katie promised him everything would be fine. After the ambulance left, she drove back to the ranch. The horses crowded the fence, their breath steaming in the cold air. She found the feed barn unlocked and started measuring out portions. She had helped her father on their family ranch in Wyoming before moving to Montana. The work came back to her naturally. She filled water troughs, checked hooves, distributed hay. The pregnant mare was in her own stall, comfortable and calm. Katie adjusted the heater and made a note to check on her twice daily. It took her 4 hours to complete everything. By then, the sun was setting, painting the snow-covered peaks orange and pink. She locked up carefully, leaving lights on in the stable. As she drove away, she realized she had missed her appointment in town entirely. It did not matter. Jake Collins needed help, and she had been there to give it. At the hospital in town, doctors determined that Jake had a severe case of pneumonia. His fever spiked to dangerous levels that first night now. He drifted in and out of consciousness, always mumbling about the horses, about the ranch, about things that needed doing. The nurses assured him everything was being handled, though they had no idea if that was true. Katie showed up at the ranch every morning before dawn, and every evening after her shift at the clinic, she fed the animals, cleaned stalls, checked fences, and monitored the pregnant mare closely. On the 3rd day, she noticed the mare showing signs of early labor. She called the senior vet from her clinic, and together they attended the birth. A healthy colt arrived just after midnight, wobbling to his feet while his mother nickered softly. Katie took a photo and drove straight to the hospital, even though visiting hours were over. She convinced a nurse to show Jake the picture on her phone. His eyes filled with tears when he saw the colt standing strong beside the mare. It was the first time he had smiled since getting sick. The days blended together. Katie developed a routine, moving between her job and the ranch with practiced efficiency. She bought feed with her own money when Jake's supply ran low, keeping careful records so he could pay her back. She fixed the gate that had been hanging loose. She even decorated the stable with a small string of Christmas lights, thinking it might cheer up the horses. Other neighbors noticed her truck at the ranch and stopped to ask questions. When they learned what was happening, they offered to help, but Katie had everything under control. She told them to send their well wishes to Jake instead. The whole valley soon knew about Jake Collins lying sick in the hospital and Katie Morrison keeping his ranch running like clockwork. Jake's fever finally broke on the 8th day. The doctor said he had been lucky. Pneumonia like his could have been fatal, especially untreated, as long as it had been. He would need another week in the hospital, then several weeks of rest at home. When they told him about his ranch, about Katie taking care of everything, about the new colt thriving in the foaling barn, he wept openly. Christmas was 5 days away. Katie drove to the hospital on a cold Sunday afternoon. She found Jake sitting up in bed, looking thin and tired but alert. His eyes lit up when she walked in. "They tell me you've been running my whole operation," he said, his voice still rough from the illness. She shrugged. "The horses needed someone. I can't ever repay you for this." "You don't need to. I was glad to help." They talked for an hour about the ranch, about the new colt, about small details of daily care. Jake listened intently, asking questions, taking mental notes. He seemed amazed that she had managed everything so smoothly. When visiting hours ended, Katie stood to leave. "Will you still check on them?" Jake asked. "Just until I'm back on my feet?" "Of course," she said. Every day. As she walked out of the hospital, snow began to fall, soft and steady. Katie thought about her own small apartment in town, about the quiet Christmas she had planned. She thought about Jake lying in that hospital bed, worrying about his animals, his life's work. She thought about the trust he had placed in her, a neighbor he barely knew. She decided right then that she would make sure Jake Collins had the best Christmas possible, even if he had to spend it in a hospital bed. Some kindnesses were worth going the extra mile for, and something told her that this was one of them. The valley was hard country, and people who showed up when you needed them were rare and precious. She would be that person for Jake because when she had been new to this place and uncertain, he had been kind to her too. Now it was her turn to return that kindness, and she would not fail him. Katie Morrison had no idea how much her simple act of feeding some horses would change both their lives. She only knew that it was the right thing to do, and that was enough. As she drove back to the ranch through the falling snow, the Christmas lights on the stable glowed warm and welcoming in the gathering dusk. The horses were waiting, and she would not let them down. Jake remained in the hospital for another full week, his body slowly recovering from the pneumonia that had nearly killed him. The doctors were cautious about his release, wanting to ensure his lungs were clear and his strength was returning. He spent his days staring out the window at the mountains, thinking about his ranch, about the work piling up, about the woman who had stepped in to save everything he had built. The other patients on his floor knew his story. The nurses had spread the word about Katie and her daily trips to the ranch. Some of the older ranchers in nearby rooms nodded with approval when they heard about it. That was the old way, they said, when neighbors looked out for each other without being asked, without expecting anything in return. It was a dying practice in modern times, but it still existed in these mountain valleys where winter could kill you and distance could isolate you. Katie continued her routine without complaint. She arrived at the ranch before sunrise, her truck headlights cutting through the darkness as she pulled up to the stable. The horses had learned to recognize the sound of her engine. They would be waiting at the fence, stamping their hooves, eager for breakfast. She fed them in the same order Jake did, following the notes she had made from his instructions during her first hospital visit. The new colt was growing stronger each day. His mother was attentive and protective, but she had accepted Katie's presence. Katie had named him December, though she had not told Jake yet. She thought he might want to choose the name himself. The colt was curious and playful, already testing his legs with short bursts of running around the paddock when she let him and his mother out for exercise. On her lunch breaks at the clinic, Katie would call the hospital to check on Jake's progress. The nurses knew her voice now and would connect her directly to his room. They would talk for a few minutes about the ranch, about the animals, about small things that needed attention. Jake's voice grew stronger each day, losing the raspy quality that had marked his illness. He asked detailed questions about every aspect of the operation, and Katie could hear the relief in his tone when she assured him everything was running smoothly. The senior vet at her clinic, a man named Pete Davis who had been working in the valley for 30 years, pulled Katie aside one afternoon. He had heard about what she was doing for Jake Collins, and he wanted to offer help. The clinic could spare some supplies, he said. Feed, medicine for the horses, anything she needed. Katie thanked him but explained that she was keeping careful records of every expense. Jake would want to settle his debts when he recovered, and she would not deny him that dignity. Pete nodded with understanding. He had known Jake for years, had treated his horses through various injuries and illnesses. Jake Collins was proud but fair, hard-working but never boastful. He was the kind of man who would be deeply uncomfortable with charity, but would work himself to the bone to repay a kindness. Pete respected that. He told Katie that if she changed her mind, the offer stood. Christmas Eve arrived with heavy snow. Katie finished her morning routine at the ranch, then drove into town for her half-day shift at the clinic. The streets were quiet, most people already home with their families. She had no family in Montana. Her parents were back in Wyoming, too far to visit for just a day or two. She had planned to spend Christmas alone, maybe watch some movies, make herself a nice dinner. It was not a sad prospect, just a quiet one. After work, she stopped at the hospital. Jake was sitting in a chair by the window, looking stronger than she had seen him since his collapse. The doctors had said he could go home in 2 days, the day after Christmas. He would need to take it easy, avoid heavy work for several weeks, but he was past the danger point. When Katie walked in, his face broke into a genuine smile. "Merry Christmas Eve," she said, setting down the small bag she had brought. "You didn't have to bring anything," Jake protested. "It's just cookies. I made too many." That was a lie. She had made them specifically for him, spending her evening baking in her small apartment kitchen. But she knew he would feel uncomfortable if he thought she had gone to special trouble. She had learned to navigate his pride carefully over the past 2 weeks. They talked about the ranch, as always. Katie told him about December, about choosing that name. Jake laughed, the first real laugh she had heard from him. He said it was perfect. They discussed his plans for returning home, the modified work schedule his doctors had recommended, the slow process of rebuilding his strength. Katie offered to continue helping until he was fully recovered, and Jake accepted with visible gratitude. As the conversation wound down, Jake grew serious. He looked at Katie with an intensity that made her shift in her chair. "I need you to understand something," he said quietly. "What you did for me, what you're still doing, it's beyond anything I could have hoped for. You saved my ranch. You probably saved my life. I was in bad shape when you found me, and if those horses had gone without care, if that mare had foaled without help, I would have lost everything. Even if I had survived, I would have come home to disaster. You prevented that. You stepped in without hesitation, without asking for anything, and you've been showing up every single day since. I won't forget that, ever." Katie felt her throat tighten. She had not done it for recognition or thanks. She had done it because it needed doing, because Jake was a good man who deserved help, because she would have wanted someone to do the same for her. But hearing him put it into words, hearing the emotion in his voice, it affected her more than she expected. "You would have done the same for me," she said simply. "I would like to think so," Jake replied. "But you didn't think about it. You just did it. That's rare, Katie. That's special." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the snow fall outside the window. The hospital had put up Christmas decorations in the hallways, tinsel and lights that reflected off the white landscape beyond the glass. It was peaceful, almost beautiful. A nurse came in to check Jake's vitals, breaking the moment. Katie stood to leave, promising to stop by tomorrow after she finished the morning feeding. Jake thanked her again, his eyes following her as she walked to the door. She turned back to wave, and he raised his hand in return. Driving back to her apartment, Katie felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the truck's heater. She had made a difference. She had been there when someone needed her, and she had followed through. In a world that often felt disconnected and rushed, she had taken the time to show up, to do the hard work, to care. It felt good. It felt right. Gee. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. Katie drove to the ranch early, wanting to get the feeding done so she could enjoy the rest of the day. The horses greeted her with their usual enthusiasm. She gave them extra portions, a Christmas treat. December ran circles around his mother in the paddock, kicking up snow, full of energy and life. Katie stood at the fence, watching him play, feeling a deep satisfaction. Her phone rang. It was Jake, calling from the hospital. "Merry Christmas," he said, his voice warm. "Merry Christmas, Jake. I just wanted to thank you again, and to tell you that when I get home, when I'm back on my feet, I want to do something for you. I don't know what yet, but something to show my appreciation." "You don't have to do anything," Katie insisted. "I know I don't have to. I want to. Please let me." Katie smiled. She knew there was no point in arguing. "Okay, we'll figure something out." They talked for a few more minutes, then said their goodbyes. Katie finished her work at the ranch, locked everything up securely, and drove back to town. She spent Christmas afternoon in her apartment, warm and content, thinking about the strange and wonderful way this month had unfolded. She had expected a quiet, lonely Christmas. Instead, she had found purpose and connection in the most unexpected place. At the hospital, Jake sat by his window looking out at the mountains he loved. He thought about his ranch, about his horses, about the new colt running in the snow. He thought about Katie Morrison, the woman who had appeared like an angel when he needed one most. He had always believed in doing right by people, in being fair and kind. Now someone had done right by him, and the depth of that gift was almost overwhelming. He made himself a promise. When he got home, when he recovered, he would find a way to repay Katie's kindness. Not with money, because he suspected she would not accept it, but with something meaningful, something that would show her how much her actions had meant to him. He did not know what that would be yet, but he would figure it out. He had time now. Time that Katie had given him by keeping his world intact while he fought to get better. The snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the valley in white silence. Christmas lights twinkled in the hospital hallways. Somewhere in town, Katie was celebrating quietly, probably not realizing how profoundly she had affected someone's life. And in a stable several miles away, horses were warm and fed, a colt was healthy and strong, and a ranch was waiting for its owner to come home. All because one person had chosen kindness when it mattered most. Jake Collins was released from the hospital on December 26th, bundled into a wheelchair despite his protests that he could walk. The nurses had grown fond of him over his 2-week stay, and they fussed over him like worried mothers. They made him promise to follow his medication schedule, to rest as much as possible, to call immediately if he felt any worsening symptoms. He agreed to everything, eager to get home. Katie picked him up in her truck, having arranged the day off from the clinic. She had cleaned his house the day before, stocked his refrigerator with simple meals, and made sure the wood stove was ready to light. Jake was quiet during the drive, staring out at the familiar landscape with intense focus as if seeing it for the first time. The mountains rose sharp and white against the blue sky. The road wound through snow-covered pastures. Everything looked exactly as it should, frozen and beautiful in the heart of winter. When they pulled up to the ranch, the horses were already gathered at the fence. They must have heard the truck. Jake's eyes went bright with emotion. Katie helped him out, staying close in case he stumbled, but he was steady on his feet. The cold air seemed to revive him. He walked slowly to the fence, and the horses pressed forward, nickering and tossing their heads. He reached out to touch them, running his hands over their faces, speaking to them in a low voice. Katie watched from a distance, giving him space. This was his reunion, his moment. She saw the tension leave his shoulders as he stood there with his animals. This was what he had been worrying about all those days in the hospital. This was what had kept him awake at night. And now he could see for himself that they were fine, healthy, well cared for. After several minutes, he turned to her. "Can I see the colt?" They walked to the foaling barn together. Jake moved carefully, still weak from his illness, but determined. Inside, the mare stood in her stall, with December at her side. The colt had grown noticeably even in the short time since his birth. He was all legs and curiosity, his coat a rich brown that would probably darken as he matured. When he saw Jake, he tilted his head, studying this new human with bright eyes. Jake leaned on the stall door, just watching. Katie could see tears on his face, but he was smiling. The mare came over to him and he stroked her neck, murmuring praise. She had done well. The colt was perfect. Everything was exactly as it should be. "December," Jake said, testing the name. "I like it. It fits him." They spent an hour in the barn, Jake checking on each horse, examining their condition, asking Katie detailed questions about their behavior over the past weeks. He was impressed by how well she had managed everything. The stalls were clean, the animals were healthy, the equipment was properly maintained. She had not just kept things running, she had done it right. Finally, Katie insisted they go inside. Jake needed to rest, to eat, to warm up properly. He reluctantly agreed. She helped him into the house and settled him on the couch with blankets and pillows. She made him soup and tea, bullied him into taking his medications, and watched until he had eaten a full meal. His color was better than it had been at the hospital, but he was clearly exhausted. "You should sleep," she said. "I'll come back this evening to do the feeding." "Katie, you've done enough. I can manage. The doctor said no heavy work for weeks. Feeding and caring for that many horses counts as heavy work. I'm still helping until you're stronger." They argued about it, but Katie was immovable. Finally, Jake surrendered. He was too tired to fight, and he knew she was right. Trying to resume his full workload now would be stupid and dangerous. He had to accept help a little longer, even though it went against every instinct he had. Katie left him sleeping on the couch and drove back to town. She felt lighter somehow, seeing Jake home where he belonged. The worst was over. He was recovering. The ranch was secure. She would continue helping for another few weeks, gradually transitioning the work back to him as his strength returned. It was a good plan, a sensible plan. What she did not anticipate was how much she would miss the routine once it ended. Over the next 3 weeks, as Jake slowly took back his responsibilities, Katie found herself reluctant to let go. She had grown attached to the ranch, to the horses, to the rhythm of the work. She had especially grown attached to December, who followed her around the paddock like a puppy whenever she visited. Jake noticed her reluctance, though she tried to hide it. He was observant, even weakened by illness. He saw how her face lit up when December trotted over to her. He saw how naturally she moved through the barn, how confident she was with the animals. An idea began to form in his mind. By mid-January, Jake was handling most of the daily work himself. Katie still stopped by every few days, ostensibly to check on things, but really because she had come to care about the place. Jake always had coffee ready when she arrived. They would talk about the horses, about the weather, about small events in the valley. A friendship was developing, easy and comfortable. One evening, as the sun was setting and Katie was preparing to leave, Jake stopped her. "I've been thinking about something," he said, "about how to properly thank you for what you did." "Jake, we've been over this. You don't need to thank me. Let me finish. I know you won't take money. I know you did this because you're a good person, not because you wanted anything in return. But I also know you love it here. I see how you are with the horses, especially with December. And I could use help. The ranch is too much for one person, really. I've been managing alone because I had to, but it would be better with a partner."
Katie stared at him.
"What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to offer you a partnership. You'd have a stake in the ranch, a say in decisions. We'd work it together. You could keep your job at the clinic if you want, work here part-time, or you could go full-time here. Whatever makes sense. I'd pay you fair wages, and over time you'd build equity. Eventually, if things work out, it could be 50-50. Katie's mind raced. A partnership in the ranch, a real stake in this place she had come to love. The chance to work with horses every day, to build something lasting. It was more than she had ever imagined. "Why would you do this?" she asked quietly. "Because you earned it. Because you proved yourself when it mattered most. Because I trust you, Katie. And because this ranch deserves to have someone who cares about it as much as I do. That's you. I saw it in how you took care of everything while I was gone. You didn't just do the minimum. You did it right. That means something." Katie felt tears burning in her eyes. This was a life-changing offer, a complete shift in her future. She had been content enough with her job at the clinic, her small apartment, her quiet existence. But this was different. This was a calling, a purpose, a home. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Take all the time you need," Jake said, "but I hope you'll say yes." Katie drove back to town in a daze. Her mind spun with possibilities and questions. Could she really do this? Did she want to tie herself to this ranch, to this valley, to this partnership with Jake Collins? What if it did not work out? What if she failed? What if she was not good enough? But underneath the doubts, there was certainty. She had felt more alive, more purposeful, more herself during those weeks caring for Jake's ranch than she had in years. This was what she wanted. This was where she belonged. She called Jake the next morning and accepted his offer. His whoop of joy over the phone made her laugh. They agreed to meet with a lawyer to draw up proper partnership papers, to make it all official and fair. Jake insisted that December would be hers, a gift to mark the partnership. Katie cried when he told her that, overwhelmed by his generosity. The news spread through the valley quickly. People were pleased to hear that Jake Collins had found a partner, that the ranch would continue to thrive. Katie Morrison had proven herself during Jake's illness, and everyone agreed she had earned her place. The older ranchers nodded with approval. This was how things were supposed to work. Trust had to be earned, and she had earned it. Katie gave notice at the clinic. Pete Davis was sorry to lose her, but understood completely. He had seen this coming, he admitted. She belonged on that ranch. He wished her well and told her to call if she ever needed veterinary advice. The clinic would always be there for her. She moved her belongings to the ranch in early February. Jake had prepared a small apartment in the renovated barn for her, a space that was private but connected to the main operation. It was perfect. She could be independent but close to the work. They established routines quickly, dividing responsibilities based on their strengths. Katie handled most of the daily animal care, while Jake focused on business management and equipment maintenance. They consulted on major decisions, found they agreed on most things. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts. They took on 2 more rescue horses, rehabilitated them, and found them good homes. They started a small breeding program, carefully selecting bloodlines. December grew into a magnificent young horse, showing promise as a future stud. Katie trained him herself, patient and consistent, building a bond that was beautiful to watch. Jake's health continued to improve. The pneumonia left no lasting damage, and by spring, he was back to full strength. But he never forgot how close he had come to losing everything. He never forgot waking up in that hospital bed, terrified about his animals, his livelihood, his life's work, and he never forgot the woman who had stepped in and saved it all. Their partnership worked because it was built on mutual respect and genuine care. They were not just business partners. They were friends. They looked out for each other, supported each other, challenged each other to be better. The ranch became something bigger than either of them could have managed alone. As winter gave way to spring, then summer, then fall, the rhythm of ranch life carried them forward. They worked hard, laughed often, and built something lasting together. Neighbors commented on how well the Collins Ranch was doing, how good it was to see Jake with a reliable partner. Some of the older folks whispered that maybe there was more than partnership developing between Jake and Katie, but if there was, it was nobody's business but theirs. What mattered was that a simple act of kindness, feeding some horses when a neighbor fell sick, had blossomed into something neither of them could have predicted. Katie had shown up when it mattered most, and Jake had never forgotten. He had repaid her kindness with opportunity, trust, and partnership. Together, they proved that sometimes the best things in life come from simply doing the right thing when nobody is watching. The ranch thrived. The horses were happy and healthy. December grew into a strong, intelligent animal that was the pride of the operation. And two people who had been alone found friendship, purpose, and a shared future in the hard, beautiful country they both loved. It was more than either of them had dared to hope for, and it all started because Katie Morrison had noticed something wrong and decided to stop her truck on a cold December morning. That was the thing about kindness. You never knew where it would lead. You never knew how one small decision could change everything. But if you paid attention, if you showed up, if you cared about more than just yourself, sometimes the world gave you back more than you ever gave. Sometimes it gave you a home, a purpose, and a partner who understood exactly what mattered. That was what happened for Katie and Jake, and that was why neither of them ever regretted the choices that brought them together. The first winter of their partnership tested them in ways neither expected. A severe cold snap hit in late November, driving temperatures to record lows. Pipes froze despite their best efforts. The heaters in the barn struggled to keep up. They worked around the clock, breaking ice and water troughs, adding extra bedding to stalls, monitoring the horses for any signs of cold stress. It was exhausting, relentless work. But they did it together, and that made all the difference. When Katie was ready to collapse from fatigue, Jake made her take a break while he covered her tasks. When Jake's old pneumonia scars made his breathing difficult in the extreme cold, Katie insisted he work inside while she handled the outdoor chores. They complemented each other perfectly, covering each other's weaknesses, amplifying each other's strengths. December, now a yearling, seemed to understand that this was serious. He stayed close to his mother, conserved his energy, and caused no trouble. Katie was proud of him. He was maturing into a remarkable horse, intelligent and calm. Several breeders had already expressed interest in him for their programs, but Katie was not ready to let him go. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The cold snap finally broke in mid-December, just in time for the anniversary of Jake's illness. Neither of them mentioned the date directly, but they both knew. A year ago, Katie had found Jake collapsed by the fence. A year ago, she had made the decision to help. A year ago, everything had changed. Jake marked the occasion by cooking dinner for both of them in the main house. Katie was surprised when he invited her. They usually ate separately, maintaining their independent spaces. But tonight, he insisted, and she agreed. She showed up at 6, stamping snow off her boots at the door. The house smelled amazing. Jake had made roast chicken with vegetables, fresh bread, and apple pie. Katie was impressed. She had not known he could cook like this. He sheepishly admitted he had been practicing, wanting to do something special. They ate together at his kitchen table, talking easily about the ranch, about the horses, about plans for spring. After dinner, Jake poured them each a small glass of whiskey. They sat by the wood stove, warm and content. The wind howled outside, but inside it was peaceful. 1 year, Jake said quietly, raising his glass. 1 year since you saved my life. Katie clinked her glass against his. 1 year since I found the best job I've ever had. They drank in silence for a moment. Do you ever regret it? Jake asked. Giving up the clinic, tying yourself to this place, to this partnership? Katie considered the question seriously. Not once. This is where I'm supposed to be. I've never been more sure of anything. Jake nodded, satisfied. Good. Because I can't imagine doing this without you anymore. You've become essential, Katie, to the ranch, to the operation, to everything we're building here. There was weight to his words, layers of meaning beyond just the business partnership. Katie felt it, but did not push. They had time to figure out what this was becoming. For now, it was enough to be here, together, safe and warm, while the winter wind battered the valley. Christmas came again, their second as partners. This time, Katie did not spend it alone. Jake invited her to join him for Christmas dinner, and she accepted. They exchanged simple gifts. She gave him a new leatherwork belt she had ordered custom-made. He gave her a framed photograph of December that he had taken secretly one morning when she was training him. She loved it, hung it in her apartment that same day. They worked the ranch together on Christmas morning, feeding the animals early so they could have the rest of the day to relax. December was playful, energized by the cold weather and the fresh snow. He ran circles around Katie in the paddock, showing off. She laughed at his antics, this horse who had been born during the worst time of her life and had become such a central part of her new one. The second winter passed more easily than the first. They had learned from their mistakes, had better systems in place. By the time spring arrived, they were ready for it. They planted a garden together, something Jake had never bothered with when he was alone. Katie convinced him that fresh vegetables would save money and taste better than store-bought. He grumbled, but helped her prepare the soil, build raised beds, and plant seeds. The garden thrived. So did the horses. So did the partnership. They fell into a rhythm that felt inevitable, like they had always been meant to work together. People in the valley stopped referring to it as the Collins Ranch. Now it was the Collins-Morrison Ranch, both names together, equal partners in every way that mattered. In late spring, a buyer from California came to look at December. He had heard about the young horse through the breeding network, had seen videos of his movement and temperament. He was prepared to pay a substantial sum. Katie gave him a tour, showed off December's training, answered all his questions professionally, but when he made his offer, she politely declined. Jake raised his eyebrows when she told him later. "That was a lot of money, Katie." "I know, but he's not for sale. Not to anyone." Jake smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. He belongs here. With us. With you." They started using December in their own breeding program, standing him at stud for select mares. His offspring were exceptional, and demand grew. The ranch's reputation grew with it. Collins-Morrison became known for producing quality horses with excellent temperaments. They were selective about their clients, refusing to sell to anyone they thought would not provide proper care. It hurt their profits sometimes, but it protected their reputation. As summer arrived, Katie reflected on how much her life had changed in 18 months. She had gone from a lonely vet tech in a small apartment to a ranch partner with a thriving business and a deep sense of purpose. She had gone from having no close friends in the valley to being respected and valued by the community. She had found December, had found this work, had found Jake, and Jake had found her. He had repaid her kindness not with money or empty thanks, but with opportunity and trust. He had given her a stake in something real, something lasting. He had made her an equal partner, not an employee. He had shown her that kindness could be returned with more kindness, that generosity could multiply instead of diminish. Their relationship had deepened beyond just business partnership, though neither of them had explicitly acknowledged it yet. They spent most evenings together now, sharing meals, talking about their days, making plans. They worked together seamlessly, anticipating each other's needs, covering each other's backs. They laughed together, problem-solved together, celebrated victories together. The valley gossips had been right. Something was developing between them, something neither of them wanted to rush or name too quickly. They had built something good, and they were both cautious about risking it. But it was there, undeniable and growing stronger. One evening in July, they sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sun set over the mountains. The horses grazed peacefully in the pasture. December stood out among them, tall and proud, a testament to Katie's training and care. Everything was quiet, except for the evening birds and the distant sound of the creek. "I've been thinking," Jake said carefully, "about the future of this place, about what happens long term." Katie looked at him curious. "I'm 42 years old. You're 31. If we're lucky, we have decades ahead of us to build this ranch into something really special. But that only works if we're both committed to staying, to seeing it through. I need to know that you're in this for the long haul, Katie. Not because I doubt you, but because I need to plan accordingly. I'm in this for as long as you'll have me," Katie said without hesitation. "This is my home now. This is my life. I'm not going anywhere." Jake nodded slowly. "Good. Because I've been thinking about making some changes to the partnership agreement. Right now it's weighted in my favor because I own the land and the original stock. But you've earned more than what we agreed to initially. I want to accelerate the timeline to 50-50 ownership. You've proven yourself 10 times over. You deserve full partnership." Katie was stunned. "Jake, that's incredibly generous." "You don't have to do that. I know I don't have to. I want to. This ranch is as much yours as it is mine now. The paperwork should reflect that reality." They talked details late into the night, working out fair terms that satisfied them both. By the time Katie walked back to her apartment, they had agreed on a new partnership structure that gave her substantial equity immediately and a clear path to equal ownership within 3 years. It was more than fair. It was transformative. Katie lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, overwhelmed by gratitude and possibility. She had fed some horses during a crisis, and it had led to this, a full partnership in a thriving ranch. A beautiful horse that was hers. A community that respected her. And a man who valued her enough to share everything he had built. She thought about the woman she had been 18 months ago, driving past this ranch on her way to town, noticing something wrong. That woman had been competent and kind, but uncertain about her place in the world. This woman, the one lying here now, knew exactly where she belonged. She had found her purpose, her home, her future, and it all started with a simple choice to stop her truck and help a neighbor in need. That was the thing about kindness. It echoed. It multiplied. It came back to you in unexpected ways. Katie Morrison had learned that lesson, and she would never forget it. Just as Jake Collins would never forget the woman who saved his ranch and, in doing so, changed both their lives forever.